Before you spend another Washington quarter, ask yourself one question: what if you're holding part of $697,000? Without knowing it? Today, we're investigating three Liberty Washington quarters, a 1990D, 1998P, and 1998D, and the hidden clues that turned ordinary pocket change into collector treasures. The 1990D Washington quarter that reached $327,000. Most people never give a second glance to a Washington quarter. It rattles around in a pocket, disappears into a cash register, or gets tossed into a jar with dozens of other coins that look exactly the same. Yet hidden among millions of ordinary-looking quarters is a story that has fascinated collectors for years. A story about a coin that appears completely normal at first glance, but under the right circumstances can become one of the most desirable modern Washington quarters ever discovered. This is the first chapter in a much larger journey through coins that seem ordinary, but hold extraordinary secrets. And it begins with the 1990D Washington quarter. At first, there is nothing about this coin that demands attention. George Washington's portrait appears on the front exactly where collectors expect it to be. The eagle dominates the reverse design. The date reads 1990. Near Washington's ponytail sits a tiny letter D, indicating the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. For most Americans who handled this coin during the 1990s, it was simply 25 cents. Nothing more, nothing special. Or so it seemed. The surprising reality is that experienced collectors often slow down when they encounter certain Washington quarters from this era, not because every example is rare, but because a handful of tiny details can separate an ordinary coin worth face value from a coin that commands astonishing prices. That difference is often invisible to the average person. In fact, two 1990D quarters can sit side by side on a table and appear identical. Same date, same mint mark, same design, same amount of wear, yet one may attract little interest, while the other immediately catches the attention of advanced collectors. Why? The answer begins with quality. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, the United States was producing enormous numbers of circulating coins. Quarters were moving through commerce constantly. Most entered circulation quickly and accumulated contact marks, scratches, and wear almost immediately. Because of this, truly exceptional examples became much harder to find than many people realize. Collectors learned that finding a perfectly preserved quarter from circulation was far more difficult than simply finding the date itself, and that is where the story becomes interesting. When specialists examine a 1990D Washington quarter, they often focus on strike quality before anything else. A weakly struck quarter may show softer details in Washington's hair and less definition throughout the design. A sharply struck example, however, displays stronger detail and a noticeably cleaner appearance. To most people, the difference seems minor. To serious collectors, it can mean everything. This is one of those hidden clues that experienced numismatists notice almost immediately. Another detail involves the coin's surface quality. Many quarters left the mint with small contact marks from the manufacturing process. Others developed scratches and nicks during transportation. A coin that somehow escaped most of those imperfections stands apart from the crowd, and finding one decades later becomes increasingly difficult. Think about what this coin has survived. It may have traveled through countless cities. It may have passed through grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, vending machines, and banks. It may have changed hands hundreds of times. Every mark tells a story. Every scratch represents a moment in history. Yet a small number of these quarters somehow avoided much of that damage. Those survivors became collector favorites. The year 1990 itself adds another layer to the story. America was entering a new decade. The Cold War was ending. Technology was beginning to reshape daily life. Shopping malls were thriving. Arcades were still popular gathering places. And quarters were essential to everyday transactions. When you hold a 1990D quarter today, you are holding a small metallic witness to that era. It moved through the economy during a period of major change. That historical connection is one reason collectors enjoy these coins. But history alone does not explain the excitement. The real fascination comes from the possibility that something unusual happened during production. Throughout the history of the Washington Quarter series, mint errors have captured tremendous attention. A slight misalignment, an unexpected die crack, a dramatic off-center strike, a doubled design element. Even small anomalies can transform an ordinary coin into a conversation piece. Collectors actively search for these characteristics because they represent moments when the minting process behaved differently than intended, and every error tells a unique story. No two are exactly alike. For the 1990 D quarter, specialists carefully inspect the date, lettering, mint mark, rim, and design details looking for anything unusual. Sometimes the discovery is subtle. Sometimes it is dramatic. Either way, those discoveries create excitement because they remind collectors that hidden treasures can still exist in plain sight. As years passed, another factor quietly increased the coin's appeal: professional grading. Decades ago, collectors often described condition using personal opinions. Today, professional grading services evaluate coins under strict standards and assign numerical grades. This changed everything. Suddenly, tiny differences became critically important. A quarter that appears nearly perfect might receive a grade that places it among the finest known examples. Another quarter that looks almost identical could receive a slightly lower grade and be worth dramatically less. That narrow gap is where some of the most remarkable stories in modern coin collecting begin. Collectors compete fiercely for elite examples because they know how difficult those coins are to locate. The higher the quality, the smaller the population. The smaller the population, the greater the demand, and demand can produce astonishing auction results. By this point, many viewers are probably wondering the same thing. How can a quarter that once bought a piece of candy become valuable enough to attract serious collector attention? The answer lies in the combination of preservation, rarity at the highest levels, collector demand, and market competition. When an exceptional 1990 D Washington quarter appears before the right audience, bidding can become surprisingly intense. Collectors understand they may not see another example of equal quality for a very long time. That scarcity changes the equation completely, which brings us to the moment that shocks most people. A top-tier example of the 1990 D Washington quarter has been associated with values reaching an incredible $327,000. Not because every 1990 D quarter is worth that amount. Not because every coin from Denver is rare, but because one extraordinary survivor separated itself from millions of ordinary examples through a combination of condition, desirability, and collector demand. That is what makes coin collecting so fascinating. The smallest details can create the biggest surprises. A coin that most people overlook can become the centerpiece of a major collection. And the 1990 D Washington quarter proves that extraordinary stories are often hiding behind ordinary appearances. But this quarter is only the beginning. While collectors continue searching for high-grade 1990 D examples, another coin in our story contains a clue that has puzzled experts for years. Some believe it reveals a hidden pattern that connects rarity, timing, and collector demand in a way few people notice. The strange part is that the clue is not where most collectors look. And once you see it on coin number 2, you may never examine a Washington quarter the same way again. There is a strange habit shared by many experienced coin collectors. When they pick up a coin, they often ignore the date at first. That sounds backward. Most people immediately look at the year. Some glance at the mint mark. Others check whether the coin appears old. But specialists sometimes begin somewhere else entirely. Why? Because some coins reveal their secrets only after the obvious. Details are ignored. The 1998 P Washington quarter is one of those coins. At first glance, there is almost nothing about it that seems extraordinary. It looks like countless other quarters that circulated through America during the late 1990s. The familiar portrait of George Washington appears on the front. The eagle remains on the reverse, continuing a design Americans had carried in their pockets for generations. Yet collectors who understand this coin often pause longer than expected when examining an exceptional example. The reason is not immediately visible, and that mystery begins in Philadelphia. The small letter P on this quarter tells us it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. By 1998, the minting process had become highly advanced, and enormous numbers of coins were being produced for circulation. Quarters moved through the economy at an incredible pace. Most were spent. Most were handled. Most were damaged. And that is where the story starts becoming interesting. Because when nearly every example experiences the same fate, the few that avoid it become something entirely different. But before we get there, another question appears. Why do collectors even care about a modern quarter? After all, 1998 does not seem particularly old. Many people watching this documentary probably remember that year. The internet was expanding rapidly. Technology companies were growing. America was preparing to enter a new millennium. Cash transactions remained a major part of daily life, and quarters were everywhere. Millions of people carried this coin without ever imagining collectors would someday study it under magnification. Yet today, some collectors examine these quarters with remarkable intensity. The reason has less to do with age and more to do with quality. Most people stop their examination here. They see a 1998 P quarter and assume they understand it. Collectors don't. They continue searching. The real difference appears when attention shifts to the coin's surfaces. A typical circulated example shows signs of life. Tiny marks, light wear, small abrasions. Evidence that the coin traveled through stores, banks, vending machines, and countless hands. An exceptional example tells a completely different story. The fields appear cleaner. The details appear sharper. The overall appearance seems unusually fresh despite the passing years. And suddenly, a common coin no longer feels common. Collectors usually focus on the date first, but specialists often look elsewhere. They study Washington's hair detail. They examine the sharpness of the lettering. They inspect the eagle's feathers. They look for strike quality. That last factor matters more than many people realize. When a coin is struck with exceptional precision, design details appear stronger and more complete. Small features become easier to see. The coin develops an appearance that immediately stands apart from average examples. The difference can be subtle. Yet once seen, it becomes difficult to ignore. This leads to another mystery. If millions were produced, why aren't exceptional examples everywhere? The answer involves survival. Think about how many opportunities existed for damage. Coins collided with other coins. They bounced through counting machines. They sat in cash drawers. They traveled inside pockets and purses. Each encounter left a mark. Each mark reduced the likelihood of surviving in elite condition. Over time, truly outstanding, examples became much harder to locate than the average collector expected. And then grading entered the story. Professional grading transformed the market because it created a standardized way to measure preservation. Suddenly, tiny differences carried enormous importance. Two quarters could appear almost identical to casual observers. Yet under professional evaluation, one might receive a noticeably higher grade. That higher grade could dramatically increase collector demand. This is where collector psychology becomes fascinating. People are not simply buying metal. They are competing for excellence. They are searching for the finest survivors. They are chasing coins that represent the very best examples of their type. And competition creates value. Authentication also plays a major role. Experienced collectors want confidence that a coin is genuine, accurately graded, and properly preserved. Certified examples often receive greater attention because they provide reassurance in a marketplace where condition can change everything. As demand grows, another layer emerges. Auction visibility. When elite examples appear publicly, collectors watch carefully. Some bid because they need the coin for a registry set. Others pursue it because opportunities are rare. A few simply recognize that the highest quality examples seldom appear twice. And when multiple motivated buyers focus on the same coin, prices can rise far beyond what most people expect. Which brings us to the question that has quietly followed this story. From the beginning, what happens when an extraordinary 1998 P Washington quarter combines exceptional preservation, strong collector demand, superior grading, and market competition? The answer surprises almost everyone. One remarkable example reached an astonishing value of approximately $221,000. Not because every 1998 P quarter is rare. Not because every Philadelphia strike is valuable, but because one coin managed to separate itself from millions of others. Through quality, preservation, desirability, and collector recognition. That is the hidden lesson behind this quarter. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often much smaller than people imagine. Yet despite everything this coin reveals, another example in this collection challenged assumptions in a completely different way. Collectors who consider this quarter the most fascinating discovery of the group often change their minds when they encounter the final coin. Because the next chapter contains a detail that many people overlook entirely. At first glance, and once noticed, it changes the entire investigation. The question is not whether the clue exists. The question is how so many collectors manage to miss it for so long. A strange thing happens at major coin auctions. Sometimes an ordinary-looking coin sits in a display case while dozens of people walk past without giving it a second glance. Then one experienced collector stops. Another joins him. Soon, several specialists are studying the same coin with intense focus. To everyone else, it still looks like a common quarter, but those collectors know something important. And that brings us to the final coin in this investigation, the 1998 D Washington Quarter. On the surface, this appears straightforward. A Washington quarter dated 1998, a small D mint mark showing it was struck in Denver. The familiar portrait of George Washington on the front and the traditional eagle design on the reverse. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, nothing that would suggest collectors could become fascinated by it. Yet the closer collectors look, the more complicated the story becomes. The late 1990s represented the final years, before the state quarter era transformed. American coin collecting, these quarters circulated during a period when most people viewed them purely as spending money. Few imagined that certain examples would someday become highly desirable collectibles. As a result, preservation became the first challenge. Most entered circulation immediately. Most accumulated marks, scratches, and wear. Most lived exactly the life a quarter was expected to live. But not all of them. And that is where the mystery begins. Most examples tell one story. Exceptional examples tell another. A typical 1998 D quarter reflects circulation. The surfaces show evidence of use. Fine details become less distinct over time. An elite example feels different. The strike appears stronger. The design elements appear sharper. The surfaces reveal a level of preservation that becomes increasingly difficult to find decades later. Collectors recognize these differences almost instantly, yet identifying them correctly requires more than a quick glance. Authentication matters. Certification matters. Grading matters. A coin that appears impressive in ordinary lighting may reveal flaws under professional examination. Another may appear ordinary until specialists evaluate the precision of its strike and the quality of its preservation. This is why top-tier examples attract attention, not because they are old, not because they are famous, but because surviving at the highest levels of quality is remarkably difficult. As collectors compete for the finest known examples, demand begins to concentrate around a very small number of coins. And when demand focuses on scarcity, the market changes. The conversation shifts from face value to collector value, from circulation to preservation, from common availability to elite rarity. Only then does the final piece of the puzzle become clear. A truly exceptional certified example of the 1998 D Washington quarter has achieved values reaching approximately $149,000. Not because every 1998 D quarter is valuable, not because every Denver Mint strike is rare, but because one extraordinary survivor separated itself from millions of ordinary examples through condition, quality, desirability, and collector demand. And that brings our investigation full circle. Across all three quarters, the lesson remained the same. The most important details were never the easiest to see. Tiny differences in preservation, strike quality, rarity, and collector interest transformed ordinary coins into extraordinary discoveries. The real story was never about 25 cents. It was about observation. Because in coin collecting, as in history itself, the greatest value is often hidden inside details most people overlook. And somewhere tonight, in a jar, drawer, collection, or forgotten pocket, another ordinary-looking coin may still be, waiting for someone to notice what everyone else missed.